Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. This is J.R. Moore sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle here on the NUTRIMEDICAL Report on Friday, the 10th day of April, year of our Lord, 2015. We may have Ann Morrison joining us. Ann, are you there yet? Ann, are you there? Okay. Ann Morrison is not with us yet, and there's a possibility that Professor James McCanney may join us as well. This is a live call-in show, and if you want to call in, you're certainly welcome to call in at the number listed at GCN's website to call into this show. Okay, Ann, are you with us?
Can you hear me, John?
I can. Thank you. Welcome aboard, Ann. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, John.
Ann Morrison is a scientist, Ann is an engineer, and she does pay very careful attention to the things that concern us. And I had some very disturbing news this morning. I typically start checking out the news about 4:15 a.m. local time. And there's a Muslim cleric in Saudi Arabia that says a man should not physically consume his wife unless he's really, really hungry. Apparently, cannibalism is part of Islam. And Mr. Waleed Shoebat, that's Shoe, S-H-O-E-B-A-T, and his website is shoebat.com, has written several articles about Muslims consuming human flesh. Very disturbing, and just when I think Islam cannot become or be regarded as any more barbaric and bizarre than it is, we reach a whole new level of depravity and barbarity, consuming human flesh as being part of their religion. Do you have any response to that, Ann?
Well, I thought that you had said that they were cannibals, that they were eating the hearts of the people that they killed.
Right. Well, that was publicly displayed last year, but I did not know it was endorsed by imams. I did not know the level at which it's actually an integral part of their fundamental religious beliefs. I thought it was something at the time that they were doing independent of any authority from the Book of Terror, also called the Quran. Apparently, it's endorsed by Muhammad, the Prophet, Allah, and the Book of Terror called the Quran. It was not an independent matter taken on by ISIS in Iraq and Syria.
Well, these people are barbarians. There's just no getting around it. We're going to have to do something. We're going to put them on reservations or do something, because they don't belong in the 21st century.
I don't believe Genghis Khan consumed human flesh. I'm pretty sure he did not. What limited knowledge I have of. And typically when I think barbarian, I think Genghis Khan. But we may need to think of a new word that is more descriptive of these. Well, they are cannibals. Maybe that's what we should just tell like it is. They're cannibals.
Cannibal sounds good to me. Whatever, though, they certainly don't belong.
We don't need to invent a new phraseology or a new word. They are cannibals. Now, I would like to dearly hear some Islamic clerics saying that Islam does not endorse cannibalism. The Muslim cleric in Saudi Arabia, where they will put you to death for rather insignificant things, to cut your head off or cut your hand off. I would dearly love to hear some imams come out against cannibalism in Islam.
Well, I think that they don't belong in the 21st century. They're acting as though they're in the, well, what are they acting as?
The 6th or 7th century, right, 1,500 years ago.
Yeah,
1,500 years ago.
Yeah, at least that.
So it's a dangerous combination, Ann, of people with beliefs from 50 generations ago, combined with state-of-the-art technology in terms of communication and weaponry and transportation. Very, very dangerous combination.
Well, they don't have the weaponry yet, but it looks like they're on the way to getting it.
Well, we don't know what they have. ISIS does, in fact, have oil revenues, which amounts to millions of dollars. There is a whole black market worldwide of weapons of every kind that you can imagine. So we really, at least I don't know. Our intelligence services may have a better idea. I personally don't know if they have nuclear devices. I will say this, there's a good possibility that they already have them. Same thing with Iran. They have tremendous oil revenues, and most anything can be purchased on the black market, up to and including nuclear weapons. So it's really hard to say what they have and what they don't have.
Well, I'm glad that our security agencies are taking a hard line on this and finding those people who are supporting them and prosecuting them.
Absolutely. It needs to be done. There's no substitute for taking a hard line on these people. It is an absolute matter of national security that these ISIS people and people related to them be given the highest national priority and the highest level of scrutiny.
Yeah, I think that both England and France are rethinking. They're inviting the Muslims to come into their nations.
Well, the German citizens have been the most outspoken, and something that's really I find very pleasing to me personally is the German Jews joining hands in hands with the German Christians to oppose Islam. I don't know what it took to put that coalition together. We also have rabbis, Jewish rabbis in France, and I don't know about other countries, but after the newspaper shootings in Paris a few weeks back, we had Jewish rabbis advocating that Jewish people both acquire and learn the use of small arms to defend themselves. And a rather hilarious response on the part of some officials in France saying that wouldn't work. Well, police officers carry firearms for a reason, and that's because they do work. So there have been some unintended consequences, Anne, of the Islamic terror in Europe and other places, unexpected coalitions forming up. We frequently think of Jewish people as being liberal anti-gun folks, but if you go to Israel, Anne, you'll find many, if not most, public school teachers in Israel are in fact armed on the premises of the school.
Well, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, many Jewish people in this country might be shocked to hear that the Jewish school teachers in the Jewish schools in Israel are in fact armed on the premises of the school. But they are. They've learned the hard way the consequences of not being armed.
Well, and don't all the citizens of Israel go through basic training and learn to shoot a gun?
All men are required to be part of the, what might in the United States, the American equivalent would be the National Guard, between 18 and 60 years old, I believe the ages. And they're also required to do a mandatory period of active duty service. Don't quote me on this. I believe it's a year and a half, 2 years. It could be 3, but I believe it's a year and a half or 2 years of active duty service. And then there's a annual training that they're required to do as well. So basically, every able-bodied male, with the exception of the ultra-Orthodox Jews, are part of the Israeli. They're equivalent to our National Guard, the Israeli Defense Forces.
And I think that's true also in Switzerland.
It is absolutely true in Switzerland. And almost all able-bodied males between 18 and 60 in Switzerland are part of the Swiss equivalent of the National Guard. And they have, drum roll please, what is legally classified as a machine gun in their homes with ammunition. And a lot of the shooting sports in Switzerland are very popular nationwide. I think we have a break, Ann, and we will take calls if somebody wants to call in.
And the call-in number is 800-259-5791.
What a beautiful world this will be.
Dr. Bill Deagle, here on the NUTRIMEDICAL Report on Friday the 10th of April with our friend Ann Morrison. And joining us from the frozen Northland is Professor James McCanny. Good afternoon, Jim.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good to have you, sir. We got a caller on hold, and we are taking calls at 800-259-5791. Jim, before we take our caller, could you tell us what your topic is going to be for? Well, tell us what it was last week and how people can listen to the archives. That would be better.
Yeah, the show last night, I dealt with planetary formation as a very interesting topic, in my world anyway, because standard science cannot tell you where planetary atmospheres, or in the case of Earth, water came from. Their theories cannot account for this, which is kind of baffling since all the planets except Mercury have pretty significant atmospheres. So if you cannot explain where the atmospheres come from, I'd say you got about 2.5 strikes against you.
Right.
But anyway, what I do is I will point out something like this, and then I go through the dialogue of actually what's going on. Venus being a perfect example of a young planet, which has a very significant atmosphere, and including all the hydrocarbons, the hydrogen compounds, and oxygen compounds. So anyway, that's the short version. The show should be archived shortly here. After this show, I'll get to actually posting it on the archive subpage.
Okay, and it will be rebroadcast also. Tell us about the rebroadcast, how and when people can listen.
10 p.m. this evening, Central Time. These are all Central Time from WTWW frequency, shortwave frequency 5830. And then also 3 o'clock in the morning. That's also from WTWW. And tomorrow, Saturday, it airs 3 times for the European market on a satellite in Europe, the Mideast, and Africa. And so, anyway, all of the ways to listen over tonight and tomorrow, the rebroadcasts are listed on my homepage, jmccsci.com. And
all right.
By the way, I should mention, too, I have kind of an insane sale going on my page today where I'm giving away free water filter elements with all of the major purchases. So a little plug there.
All right. Well, glad to hear that, Jim. Ann and Jim, we have a caller on hold. We've got Glenn. Good afternoon, Glenn.
Hello, John, Ann, and Jim. I generally try to refrain from eating family members, but if I arrive home from a hard day's work and there's only one piece of leftover pizza, well, it just might be sort of a me or them situation,
But the prophet does command you to cook them first. You need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think a microwave will suffice, but even though microwaves don't go back that far, it's a lot faster and slow roasting over the fire. But anyway, actually, the only other thing I wanted to point out in seriousness is about this Yemen thing. It seems that the Iranians have dispatched naval vessels to the region, and I believe as have the United States. So if we're seeing a scaling up of naval activity, this could be, a real game changer. If it comes to the point where there's any sort of exchange of ordnance between naval vessels, we're talking about a real paradigm shift in the whole thing. Just wanted to...
Absolutely. U.S. naval power is a sight to behold. You don't want to mess with the United States Navy. You really don't.
All right. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. We appreciate the call. Ann, you have any follow-up to Glenn's call?
Well, I was going to ask you, John, what do you think? Saudi Arabia is going in there on the ground. They're sending in ground troops, and they are bombing the refugee camps. So,
your refugee camps should be armed, but what we're seeing, Ann and Jim, is unprecedented. I'm not a major student in the Middle East. I know more than most, but I don't believe there's ever been a coalition of Arabic Muslim countries going up against another Arabic Muslim country. I don't believe that's ever happened. If it has, I'm not aware of it. But this coalition of these countries joining together with Saudi Arabia, I'm pretty sure is unprecedented. And as crazy as that part of the world is, what's happening with this coalition led by Saudi Arabia is probably what needs to happen And I think behind the scenes, Israel is an ally of Saudi Arabia, of all things. If you can believe it, Israel is probably, to the best of my knowledge, an ally of Saudi Arabia. And that's how dangerous, if you can get Israel and Saudi Arabia to cooperate on anything, that's telling you that this is really something very special and very dangerous. Jim, do you have any response to this?
Well, in addition to that, Russia for some time has been building activity, let's put it this way, around the United States. There's cases where they've flown along the international boundary lines. U.S. planes have gone up to meet them. And so what they're doing is they're playing the war games. That's what was going on in Europe the day the Germanwings airplane went down. There's speculation that it was due to activity, the game activity. But on all fronts, people are playing with this. And, it's a very, very dangerous world today. It's extremely dangerous. It's very dangerous for Americans to travel almost anywhere in the world today. So yeah. And remember that the majority of major wars started with some insignificant little exchange, and we all know what those are. Many times those were planned events to put the powder keg, the match to the powder keg.
Well, one of the most notable ones that we're mostly familiar with is one man with one bullet shooting Archduke Ferdinand, triggering World War I.
Oh, yeah.
And who would have guessed? Who would have guessed?
Yeah, but those are the kind of things ready. And, of course, somebody in a political seat says that's what we needed. And everybody goes marching off.
Yep, marching off to the beat of the drums.
The stage is set. And once it starts, I don't see any way of undoing it. And
I don't either, Jim, unfortunately. No, Iran is a client state of Russia, and Iran is also the sponsors of these Houthi rebels. So that coalition is certainly something to take note of and be terribly concerned about, quite frankly.
The one thing I think that you have to point out here, too, is the involvement of the CIA in sponsoring Al-Qaeda and other groups in the past. They were good guys at one time on our side, so to speak, and then they, like a lot of things, a drug deal gone bad. So really, it's a mixed up world out there.
Absolutely. Here's our break. Call number is 800-259-5791. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore and Professor James McCanney and Ann Morrison sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle here on the NUTRIMEDICAL Report on Friday, the 10th day of April. The live call-in show, I'll give the number. We got a caller on hold. The call-in number is 800-259-5791, and we have Ed in Pennsylvania. Good afternoon, Ed.
Hi, guys and gal.
Hi.
You ever watched a movie called The Atomic Bomb Movie with William Shatner?
No, it sounds good.
It's awesome. Now, the U.S. Navy, after World War II, they put a whole flotilla of huge ships out in the Pacific. They set off a nuke above them. Didn't do too much damage, but then they set a nuke off underneath the water, and it ripped a hull out of every ship there. So nuclear war is not going to be good for the U.S. Navy even.
No, I think that was near Christmas Island where they did that, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right.
You don't have to hit our ships. You just set a nuke off certain distance underwater, and everyone will go to the bottom.
Well, that's a fascinating concept, and I was not aware of that. Jim, were you aware of that?
Well, I know that you have Exocet-type missiles that are sufficient to take down even aircraft carriers. So a naval war would tend to be short-lived these days.
Right. He's talking about just a concussion, knocking out the ships. And have you heard about that, the concussion from a nuclear device causing a ship to collapse and sink?
No, I haven't. What I've heard is that the salt in the salt water becomes radioactive, and it clings to the hull, and you cannot clean it off of. I mean, it bonds to the hull of the ship. You cannot clean it. The ship is ruined.
No kidding.
Radioactive from that moment on.
Oh, really getting an education here. Ed, anything else?
Yes, William Shatner does the movie. You could go on YouTube. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, Shatner usually does a good job. Ed, we appreciate the call. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ed and Ann, all of us were children when the Cold War was at its height, and that hysteria, that Cold War hysteria, seems to be getting back on the table as a possibility. Nuclear devices being set off by countries. Any response, Ann or Jim?
The Cold War is one of the actual European banker modus operandus for keeping the entire world against each other. I once read a dissertation on, and it always made me wonder, how come a country like the United States, how come our president is so much under the thumb of the bankers? And the reason is, in the same with Russia, is because they provide a balance of power. So the entire balance of power is so that if one side gets a little too uppity and doesn't pay back its loans, they just fund the other side to the point where it'll destroy the non-paying side. And
right.
the Russian Revolution is a great example of that, where they funded both the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. And in the end, they funded the Bolsheviks, withdrew funding from the Mensheviks, and we all know the rest is history. But anyway, the Cold War, I cannot give a percentage, but I would say that the high percentage of what's going on today is constructed, manipulated activities.
Agreed.
And countries like now, Russia has pulled out. Russia knows what's going on. Putin has pulled out of the dollar. Other countries like France just did, and Germany they have a central clearinghouse, a new one in China that just came online the other day, where they do not clear their international commerce in dollars anymore. So this is a new world we're dealing with, something that has never happened before. And, well, anyway, so, yeah, now we're heading into war activity, and the world banks have always used the United States as a pawn. So, anyway, I would say there's a high percentage of this going on, and world reacting to it.
Well, of course, Marine Corps General Smedley Butler documented what you're talking about, Jim, in his book, War is a Racket. And he had been sent to a number of places to enforce the will of the bankers throughout Central and South America in the 1920s and 30s, and working basically on behalf of United Fruit and other U.S. corporations. So there's nothing new about this, is there, Jim?
Yeah, no. We're watching the same thing over and over again, and there's a book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that talks about the same thing, the CIA going in and doing the dirty work in a country to either have political effects, or if that doesn't work, the last straw is to send in the military, and we've seen that in Latin America. They're getting ready to try and pull the string on Venezuela, except Russia now is much aligned with Venezuela. So we have a very complex, distorted, messed up, tense world right now. Right.
Well, with the efforts to develop closer diplomatic ties with Cuba, the new bad boy on the block appears to be Venezuela, doesn't it, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. And that whole thing with Fidel is very interesting. The other day, he doesn't make many public appearances, but he did the other day. And his comment was he's open to talk with anybody, except he doesn't trust Washington. So after 50 years of sanctions, they're not exactly warming up to the D.C. prez there.
Something that I haven't heard publicly discussed, of course I don't hear everything, is the topic of reparations for the Cuban citizens who had their private property seized by the newly formed Cuban government in 1958-59. tens of millions of dollars of real estate and other private property seized by the Cuban government. And I think reparations would be in order, don't you think, Tim?
Well, I'm not sure that you'd have to look at both sides of that coin. The view of the people there was that the value was basically taken from the people who lived there, and so
right.
Their view is they were simply taking back what already belonged to them.
Well, that is the communist view, that if you had certain assets, that those assets should be seized without compensation. And the people, many of those people are still alive, and of course their heirs, their sons and daughters and grandchildren are still alive that did own those assets, homes, factories, farms, mines, whatever they might be. The true wealth of any country is mines, factories, and farms. That's where wealth comes from, is mines, factories, and farms. And that's what the Cuban government seized without compensation.
Right, but once again, it turns out most of those people were not Cuban nationals. They were from other places. When Bolivia nationalized its oil a number of years ago, basically they were under severe pressure to, but they nationalized their oil reserves and distributed the wealth to the people. And it's something, that's what's going on in Venezuela, and it's one of the critical issues, that there are people there who are seeing a doctor for the first time in their life, or a dentist. And so the companies that were there were not exactly good, what would you call, mentors or
good citizens,
guardians.
Good corporate citizens.
Good citizens, yeah. So there's about six sides to that coin. We could talk for quite a while on that one, but
absolutely. And you got some updates on some various viruses and so forth. Why don't you jump right in there with your updates on those?
Yeah, I want to talk about the MERS coronavirus. You know, the MERS coronavirus is another one of these smoldering diseases, and it's starting up again in Saudi Arabia. Of course, it's endemic in Saudi Arabia. And there's a significant number of people who catch it, and they don't know how they're catching it. One way to
Hold
catch
that thought,
it.
Ann. Hold that thought. We got a break. Call number is 800-259-5. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. It's J.R. Moore sitting in for Dr. Bill Deagle, sitting in with Ms. Ann Morrison and Professor James McCanney. And you were starting to give us a review of the MERS coronavirus and some others. Let's just jump right back in there.
Yeah, MERS coronavirus is endemic in Saudi Arabia, and it has spread outside of Saudi Arabia also. I want to remind people that the case fatality rate is about 40%. 40%. And the incubation, it's huge, and the incubation period is 28 days, which is a week longer than it is for Ebola. So this is something people need to be aware of. And of course, we have a history of travel to Saudi Arabia for Muslim holidays, and people with high-risk behavior, and which they define as consumption of raw camel milk, contact with camels, contact with somebody in the hospital who has the MERS coronavirus. Now, they are looking back 14 days. When somebody gets ill, they look back 14 days. 14 days isn't even the incubation period. It's half the incubation period.
Right.
So they're not going to, if they're looking for possible high-risk exposures, they have to look back 28 days. I don't know what it's going to take to get the medical community behind this incubation period.
It'll take dead bodies is what it's going to take before they wake up.
Now, some of these people are from the Philippines, from Yemen, from Sudan, from Pakistan, and from Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh and Pakistan are relatively undeveloped, and if it gets set in there and we don't know what the vector is, we think it was probably a bat, which went into a camel, which went into a human. But if it's a bat, and the bat bites a human in Pakistan, that has it, well, then it can be in the animal population over there. So this is not good news. We're coming up to the pilgrimage time period, and we're going to have people traveling between the United States and Saudi Arabia, and you need to be aware of that. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about is the H7N9. We haven't talked about that because we don't have it over here in the Americas yet. But in China, we've had 10 cases with 10 deaths. And so that's being tracked by flu trackers. And Hong Kong doesn't like that. Hong Kong once, they put out an influenza pandemic alert, and they went to alert, and now they've reduced it to serious because they haven't had any more than the 10 cases. And then the highest, the highest one is emergency. So they think that people are getting it from handling infected chickens, and they don't think there's evidence that the virus spreads easily from person to person, but they're not saying that it doesn't spread from person to person. Let's see, I want to talk about Ebola. We have some interesting news about Ebola.
Right.
They have named the Ebola from West Africa, and they're calling it the Mekona virus. And the abbreviation is EBOV/MAK. Now, that's to differentiate it from the Ebola that's in Sudan, Zaire, the Reston Ebola, and the Congo Ebola. So now we've got the MAC, or the Mekona Ebola.
Right.
And they found 300 mutations between the Mekona Ebola, which is in West Africa, and the Zaire Ebola. Now, it's got a 21-day incubation period. Zaire's was 10 days, and we know that it kills about 70% of the people. The case fatality rate is about 70%. We're still having trouble getting information out of Guinea. Guinea is just they try to hide the figures one way or another so that they don't report them, so people can continue to come and visit them.
Right.
It got this Mekona designation. There were several names that were suggested, but this river starts in Guinea, and then it runs along the border between Guinea and Liberia, and then it runs through Sierra Leone. So it touches the three devastated countries in West Africa. So we no longer have to call it the West African Ebola. They call it the Ebola virus disease, EVD. Now we call it Ebola virus/MAK for Mekona. And they have discovered that, for instance, some of the treatments, for instance, ZMapp, which worked against Zaire, does not work against this. So they're having to update their protocols and their vaccines, and to make them so that they can treat this Mekona variant of the Zaire Ebola virus. So that remember that Ebola has an incubation period of 21 days. Countries are waiting 42, which is 2 times 21, before they say that they are clear of Ebola. And we still have cases popping up in those 3 countries, as well as, we just had a person that went to Australia who is being tested for Ebola. And the good news is that the American who was at the National Institutes of Health in Maryland was critical, came over about a month ago, was critical at that time, and is now been upgraded to fair condition. So that's a miracle.
That's a good thing. That's a miracle. Yeah.
We don't know how he was treated, and we don't know what treatment was being used, and anyway, they're monitoring about 40 other Americans who may have been in contact with the infected man. So far, none of them have tested positive. So that's what I've got.
Okay. Jim, that's quite a review of these various diseases. Do you have any thoughts on the various diseases around the planet?
Well, Anne, would you say that in spite of the scientific advancements, medical treatments, that just keeping people quarantined is the age-old solution, and it's still the solution of choice, really? Is that true?
Well, Jim, what they want to do is they want you to go into voluntary quarantine, and that means they don't have to feed you. They don't have to provide you with food. I'm not talking about voluntary.
I'm not talking about voluntary. When it comes to life-threatening diseases, unfortunately, if you have it, it's not a matter of personal choice anymore. I'm sorry. We do have to look at the greater society, and you try and do everything you can for these people. But the idea that people should just voluntarily do this, the majority of people are not going to voluntarily do anything. And a lot of people don't have the wherewithal. I mean, we can talk about voluntary quarantine, but most people, if you talk, you have to understand the level of understanding a lot of the people you're dealing with here is they don't understand what that means. It's like trading beads to the American Indians for the land. They didn't understand what it meant, that these beads, okay, now we got your land. And so that's what I would consider. But back to the question, eliminating the idea of voluntary or non-voluntary, would you say that quarantine is the long-term, and we're talking, 100 years from now, including 100 years from now, because no matter what you develop to combat a disease, communicable disease, that's going to be overcome by the disease. It's going to transform into another one. It's going to transmute, and ultimately, quarantine is the only thing that works.
Ebola has the capability of wiping out man.
I think we'll have to end the show with your statement there, Ann. We do. Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you.
Thank you, John.